This episode is brought to you by HighSpots.com. HighSpots.com is the leading provider of professional wrestling and mixed martial arts merchandise. From wrestling boots to wrestling DVDs, wrestling action figures to title belts, HighSpots.com has the largest selection of wrestling merchandise. Go there right now with our link, tinyurl.com/STS HighSpots. STSHIGHSPOTS. Shop there with that link. It won't cost you any extra, but it will help support this podcast.
Have you listened to episode 100? That's right, 100. That was Thursday's episode. Thank you for everyone that's listened. Thank you for the great comments. Here's a clip. If you haven't listened, listen now. Download. Do it.
Blurb in there once that said that if you wanted to rent his mailing list, he'd rent it to you at a reasonable cost. And it was reasonable. He didn't charge hardly anything for it. He had probably 500 subscribers.
Right.
So I got that, and I just started sending out free copies to the people on that list, having never seen The Observer, having never seen Mat Results. And I was trying to keep the kayfabe. I was trying to let people know, okay, this happened, but we're not going to come right out and say it's worked.
Right.
And Dave just happened to be on the list that I sent some of my first copies to. And so Dave just turned around and sent an Observer back to me, and I went, whoa. and like I said, I had no idea that you could say that, and I had no idea that any of them existed. I thought that I had an original idea, and found out that it was anything but original. So, and then that's kind of how the newsletter got started.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's start the party.
Hey, welcome everyone. We're live from STS Studios here in St. Louis, Missouri for episodes 101. That's right, 101. You know, I got to get my business out the way first. That's the business out the way. A big thank you to Wrestling to Max website. That's W2Mnet.com. My buddy Sean Garmer. Bob McGee at Pro Wrestling's Between the Sheets. PWBTS.com. Locals to Legends, Gene Jackson. Locals to Legends.com. That's right, guys. And hey, you know, we're doing the Let's Talk Shiznit on the Dirt Sheet series. And just want everyone to, a big reminder is episode 97, we did Chokehold. Episode 95, we did Ringside Reflector. Last week we did John Gallagher. Episode 79 is with Jeff Zinger. And we have a two-part episode. 70 and 71 is with our old buddy Steve Beverly. So John Gallagher is 99. Just want to remind everyone of that. You can go back and listen to all of those. Kind of gives you a history of the sheets, of the dirt sheets there. You guys can reach me at Cool Kids Wrestling and MMA Talk Facebook group. You guys can join that Facebook group. If you act like an ass, we'll kick you out. I'm also shooting the shiznit there on Facebook. All the episodes, new episodes are posted there. www.stspod.club has all of the episodes up there. At Comic Book Mark BT on Twitter. At BT Shooting the Shiznit on Instagram. That's right, we're all over the place, guys. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, Pod Paradise, Spreaker, just a little bit of everything. If you can listen to a podcast, we're on there. All right, a big shout out to Suplex City Limits, Creative Control with JoJo, Who's Right Podcast, P3 Radio with my buddy Max. And I want to put this podcast over real quick. I'm listening to Down and Dirty with Dutch Mantel. Dutch and me go way back. And if you enjoy just listening to stories about old wrestling, especially Memphis area wrestling, he is the podcast to listen to. Keeping It 100 has a Patreon site. That's right. It's only $1. I joined a round table over there. You guys give $1. They may pick you to do a round table. $1 also helps out my buddy JoJo over there. So help a brother out and support their Patreon site. Okay, guys, it's time to get on with the show. Oh, okay. Let's wait. We're not going to the show just yet. WeHaveMerch.com. That's right. WeHaveMerch.com. Go there, because that's where our T-shirts are now. For only $12.99 for standard sizes up to 6X large, guys. 6X large is just $17.99. Go to WeHaveMerch.com. Look for the Shooting the Shiznit store. Order your shirts today. Now, on with the show. Hey, we're here. I'm going to bring my guests from the green room, Wrestling Perspectives, Paul McArthur. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having the Syracuse on in the green room. Appreciate that.
No problem. Now, some people listening to this will have no idea, because who knows when this will be actually aired. Hopefully this Tuesday. But guys, we're doing this on a as always, we're live from SDS Studios, and it's kind of a dreary day here on a Sunday afternoon. Paul's going to be part of the Sheets series that we're doing here today. Did in March, and then we're going to try to continue bringing on people from the I know this is going to make you feel old, but from when I say the old newsletters.
I guess technically we are.
Yes, very much so. Paul, I want to start, before we actually start talking about Wrestling Perspective, I always like to bring you old newsletter guys on and start talking about when you become a fan.
You know, I was channel surfing one day in 1980. We got cable about a year before or something. And one I'd see on the program guide, it would, have the various listings, and a lot of wrestling was on, but I never paid any attention to it. I thought it seemed kind of, it didn't interest me at all. And one day, Saturday afternoon, WTBS, 6 o'clock wrestling, as you know, Georgia Championship Wrestling, and I decided, well, I'm bored, I'll just flip this on. And you might remember the angle. It was when Austin Idol was supposed to tag team with, I believe it was Mike Davis, against the Freebirds. And Austin was late to the event. Actually, no, he was supposed to team with Kevin Sullivan, I think. But anyways, he was late to the event, and, there was a telegram that was sent indicating that, he had a flat tire or something, and he wasn't going to be able to make it. And so they end up, the Freebirds end up wrestling Kevin Sullivan and some other guy. Again, maybe it was Mike Davis who wrestled with Kevin Sullivan. And, they beat him badly. And finally, Idol, of course, shows up at the studio late and says, hey, I couldn't, I had a flat tire. And Michael Hayes says, well, it's not our fault you had 4 flat tires. And he's like, how did you know I had 4 flat tires? And, it was just classic. And I was hooked. And I think also something happened. I think Austin Idol knocked one of the Freebirds around with a belt or something. It was pretty vicious. And same episode, I also saw Tony Atlas for the first time. And so where I was in upstate New York, we were able to get the WWF, which was the home promotion, on cable, and we were able to get Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then occasionally USA Network had some other promotions over the years. And that was how I got hooked. But it was that day watching Georgia Championship Wrestling because I was bored and saw a great angle with the Freebirds and Austin Idol and saw Tony Atlas.
Awesome. Yeah. I remember Tony would bring all those kids in the ring with him. And for some reason, and I don't know why, but that always pissed me and my best friend off. We were always mad at Tony. Like we couldn't cheer Tony Atlas because he brought those little kids in. I don't know. That was just us. We were kids too, but we were just like, man, I'm sick of seeing those kids come to the ring. I know it was really supposed to make him over, but it worked opposite for us. Great. I mean, that's a great memory. Georgia Championship Wrestling was part of, and it seems to be part of everyone that starts as a wrestling fan. Eventually, you discover Georgia Championship Wrestling one way or another, even though, you started watching WWE. But just because, and people don't understand WTBS being a really super station in the sense that it was a big deal for you to get a cable station. I didn't have cable, so because I lived in what we called the country of a small town, and so I would go to my best friend's house to watch Georgia Championship Wrestling. Then we'd stay up, and I want to think it was WOR was the in New York, and the first angle I saw there was Slaughter, and it was Pat Patterson and Slaughter. Was that right? Where he was putting the Cobra Death Lock clutch, ever what he called it. And I think Patterson got out, and they ended up, that was the angle the first angle I saw on WWE TV, and it was like, wow, I love this stuff. I say WWE, but everyone knows what I'm talking about. So we started.
I remember that angle too. That was right around the time. That was like early '81 or something. They did that one. It was right around the time I was getting into it. It was late '80, early '81.
Yeah, it had to be because I was in high school at the time. So it was during that period of like I graduated in '85, so it was like 4 years there that I was I've been a wrestling fan forever, but it seemed like cable television. And me and Steve Beverly talked about this on a couple of shows that technology changed wrestling every time it changed. And it really did with cable because you had more promotions you could watch, and then the VHS came out, and then now the internet, where you can watch that angle that we just talked about, where you could go on YouTube and look it up and watch it as many times as you want to. But technology changed the wrestling business, and that's when it was changing. We were able to watch more than one wrestling program than just watching our local. And then, at what point I started subscribing to the Observer during the summer of before I started school my senior year, and I went to school that year thinking I knew everything in the world about professional wrestling now because I had the Wrestling Observer, and I was much smarter wrestling fan than my senior friends there that were also huge wrestling fans. But when did you start doing the Wrestling Observer?
That would have been in the fall or late summer of 1989, and I picked it up because you remember the Phantom of the Ring used to have a column in Wrestling Eye.
Right. Yeah. So, I remember Wrestling Eye. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one of the first, over-the-counter publications, newsstand publications that actually suggest that wrestling wasn't completely legit. And so the Phantom of the Ring used to have newsletters and their addresses and how much you have to pay for it. So I took a shot on the Observer. I sent whatever it was. I think it was $9 for 4 issues or whatever the number was at the time, and read the first issue, and holy cow. Everything you suspected was going on and a whole lot more. It was phenomenal. And so after that led to Mat Watch and then Torch and Arena Report. I seem to recall picking up this thing called Tape Update you might be familiar with.
Yeah. That was, I tell it that, that was my gimmick. Everybody talks about, well, they had 3. I only had I think at the most 300 subscribers, but, I was giving those tapes away, guys, for free. I said that a bunch, but they were donations, so.
Donations to a worthy cause.
There you go.
The Trammell Retirement Fund.
There you go. I wished.
But so I just started picking up newsletter after newsletter after newsletter. Just like wow, just had to get my fix of the information that was out there, and that's kind of what inspired me. And then there was Ringside Reflector, and you had JD on a couple weeks ago, and I thought that was really interesting. And Dave Skolnick and I. So Dave and I were college friends. And one day in a class, Broadcast Regulation and Control, for which I was the TA, David was taking the class, and I had a Four Horsemen shirt on. And David saw it, and he flashed me the symbol of excellence. And we started talking and discovered that we had this mutual passion for wrestling. And he graduated a year later, so when I'd come up to Oswego, I'd hang out at the radio station with him and just, talk about wrestling for hours on end. And, when I discovered The Observer and Matwatch, I sent him copies, and he was really into it. And one day in 1990 or late 89, I said, we should do our own newsletter, because I wasn't smart enough to realize that we couldn't. So we decided to do it.
I mean, and it was, the thing about it is, there was the Wrestling Observer. We talked about when the Torch came along. I told that I think the only reason I subscribed to it because it had a color photo at the time. And Wade has made a living and still makes a living to this day doing him and Dave and a few other people that we grew up with there as the newsletters. But yours was one of those that we had the news coming in with the Observer, and the Torch sometimes had something the Observer didn't say, and so you had to kind of eventually subscribe to it, and then you had other news, newsletters. I guess that's the correct way of saying it. That people try to give the scoops and stuff, and there was some that would succeed. I really like Matwatch because it grabbed a different audience, and he did have good sources because of the television. But you guys did something different. You didn't say, hey, we're going to do that, just about the news.
No, in fact, we didn't do news at all. We were inspired by J.D. McKay's Ringside Reflector, and that Ringside Reflector was really just a bunch of wrestling fans who had opinions. And we had our own opinions. We were diehard NWA fans, hated the WWF product at the time with some exceptions, and really wanted WCW/the NWA, all that, to succeed. And so we just had our own opinions about it and really wanted to promote that idea, and we didn't want to write for anybody else. So we decided to start our own thing, and we got a few people who wrote for us in the early years, Vic Stanley being a regular contributor, Rodney Layton, who you may remember, did some things for us here and there, and then we got a few other writers on board as well. In the very early tiers. And then I think the big coup for us was when we got Ed Gurria, the Phantom of the Ring. When Ringside Reflector folded, he jumped over to us. And that was an amazing coup because he knows so much about wrestling history and is such a fantastic writer. And then we also started doing interviews. So we conducted a bunch of interviews. Often they were the first time the wrestler had done a shoot interview. So Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, the first time they ever gave shoot interviews was to us. Jack Briscoe, Stan Hansen, Dory Funk Jr., and so on. I could keep going on, but I won't bore you with a list of names. So we started commentary. And then he went away for a bit and then started doing cartoons for us. And yeah, I think we tried to do something different, and I like to think we succeeded, but you be the judge of that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about it. I remember, before we get into all that, we'll take a commercial break and we'll be right back, guys.
80s Tees is the leading online retailer of officially licensed t-shirts, specializing in retro movie, music, TV show, video games, comic book, and cartoon t-shirts. 80s Tees has you covered. They have everything from G.I. Joe, Seinfeld, and Back to the Future, as well as 152 different classic wrestling shirts. Plus, free shipping on all orders over $50. Visit them now at our link, tinyurl.com/STS80stees. That's tinyurl.com/STS80STEES. Visiting them at our link will cost you nothing extra, but it will help support this podcast. Now, back to the show.
All right, we're back with our guest. Like you said, did you succeed? I think so. The thing I remember about the Wrestling Perspective is when I first got it, and all I could think of is, man, these guys are writers. We had a lot of people putting out newsletters, me included. I was not a really great writer, didn't have anyone editing my stuff. And then we had, Dave Meltzer, the guru of not only the Wrestling Observer, but the runoff sentence that lasted like 3 pages and you wondered what was going on. and you had to
the
go
broken
back.
O key. Remember the infamous broken O key
Yes,
for about a year?
Oh, I forgot about that. Why don't you just buy a new fucking typewriter? But yeah, that was the part. And the part I liked was that it was, I don't know. You know, it was one of those newsletters, in my opinion, that I could have handed to anyone, even outside the business, or someone that wanted to become, you know, smart to the business, or you thought was a really good fan, but just really didn't get it, in the sense that you're not, you're able to show them something that's written by some intelligent people instead of just a bunch of. Now, Lance Levine was a really good writer, was fun to read. But you guys come off as really smart. And I grabbed a quote from Chris Cruz. Now, Chris is still a friend of mine, and I can't get him to come on the podcast or nothing. I mean, he always tells me he hates professional wrestling. And, you know, you can't say happy birthday to him or have a good day or anything. Chris is just he's a grumpy old man is what Christopher Cruz is. But he said no other wrestling publication provides incisive, long-form interviews from the biggest names in the business, combined with smart commentary and the Phantom of the Ring's look at the history of pro wrestling. And I think that really just summed it up. What you were known for was, at first, you guys just dove into a subject. And you can remind me something that you can remember that you felt was, something that you wanted to talk about. You two guys wanted to talk about.
Well, when we started up, I think one of the first issue we had an article about blading, and
right.
We're arguing that wasn't a good idea because this was around the time. Actually, it was a little before Magic Johnson's announcement, so it would have been about a year and a half before Magic Johnson's announcement, actually, if I'm remembering correctly. But we were thinking, that doesn't seem like the healthiest thing to do in the world. And so there were some other things that we looked at the time. I remember, each article would be 1,000 words or something like that, just kind of deep dive into a particular topic. Sometimes they go longer. We did in our 8th issue a complete issue that was all about, what does the NWA need to do to try and survive in 1990? And made a bunch of different suggestions about how they could actually approach being successful, trying to correct a lot of the errors that were obvious to all the fans who were watching, but somehow didn't seem to be obvious to management. So those were a couple of the things that we really got into. And then it was like, what was the hot topic of the day, or what was interesting at that particular time? Several years later, back in the early 2000s, I did a piece on positioning and the marketing concept of positioning and how it applied to pro wrestling, and used the WWF and the old NWA, WCW, and the AWA for that matter as examples. That one went 6,000 words, which I thought was long, but everyone told me they liked it, so I don't know. We just had a lot of fun, and I think one of the reasons why we stopped the newsletter in 2016, but it was 2006. So we started in 1990, and then in 2006 stopped doing the print edition. But our website is still live, although we really don't put much new content on it. But we stopped because we pretty much had said everything we had to say. Wrestling as we knew it and as we were fighting for in 1990 was no longer the same thing. We'd interviewed a bunch of people, and certainly we're interested in interviewing more people. But I think after 16 years, we decided it was time to call it a day. And I think if we benefited from, the praise that we got from people saying, hey, you guys wrote really well, I think it's because we had each other as editors. David Skolnick is an award-winning reporter in Youngstown, Ohio now. And so he would edit my work, and I would edit his work. And it was a nice combination. And you combine that with us being college buddies, we could say anything to each other, and the other one wouldn't get offended by it.
Right. And it's great to have. I've got, Lance Levine's my co-host on one of these podcasts on my network, and we've got that relationship, and it takes that relationship sometimes to have someone say, hey, this is really not a good idea, or I don't think we should we shouldn't talk about that way. And it's usually Lance, because, I wouldn't be out of line. No means would I be out of line about anything. But, I'm reading some stuff on WrestlingPerspective.com, and it was like 2,000 to 3,000 word essays, and it was like that's how you guys said, okay, we can write, and we're writing these essays, and you're thinking to yourself, this is promoting a wrestling zine. You know, I mean, they're telling us that they can write, and they're being smart about it, kind of thing. But it was always, I usually got your newsletter. The Observer was one of those things where it usually took 2 or 3 days. A lot of people sat down and read it in one day, but mine was always I was busy. Want to call myself busy, try through, but I would stack other newsletters up, and yours was one of those that would have either a couple of what I considered at the time long-ass essays or long-ass articles that I would enjoy, but kind of read it all in one setting, especially if it was an interview. You guys were getting people that still guys that are part of the business in one way or another. Jim Cornette, Terry Funk's still alive and kicking. You talked to Gordon Soley, the legend Bruno Sammartino, Johnny Ace. You had Johnny Ace, Terry Taylor, who's still very much part of. He's always working. Terry's been working since day one. Diamond Dallas Page, the late Chris Kanyon, which I think some of these young guys need to watch Kanyon videos to see all these moves he came up with. And William Regal, who was one of he seemed to be a smart fan's favorite wrestler kind of thing back then. What led you to getting all these guys? Were they subscribers? Did they find your newsletter, or how did you end up? I mean, it wasn't like you was emailing people back in the day.
No, right. No, there was no. Well, when we started, there was no email. Eventually, there would be, and boy, that changed the world when you could actually email files back and forth. We were literally mailing articles back and forth to each other, and faxing them when we could. So it was just a long form process. I would send an article to Dave, and then he would go and edit it, and then mail it back to me, and then I would input his edits into the file. So that it would then come out. I think our initial program was McWrite or something like that, and then we used Microsoft Word and then a bunch of other stuff. It was, hilarious when I look at, how much time it took to do things that today would be done in an instant. But back then, we had contacts, I guess, was the way we went about it. We got, one set of interviews we got because we just hung out at an independent show afterwards and asked people to do interviews, and they did. So we got, one of the great enhancement talents of all time, SD Jones, to talk to us. And yeah,
I'm
right?
sorry. That was a good interview, though. I remember that. Yes.
It was SD Jones, and so when you got into wrestling, he was always on WWF.
He was the. You're right. He was probably the number. Who else was? I want to say Jose Rivera. Is that right? Is that one of those? There was two. Estrada. Those two guys were the top jobbers, I think, at the time. So.
Yeah, but then we got superstar Billy Graham around the time that he was talking about how steroids had hurt his body so much, and was saying how many wrestlers in the business were actually doing some kind of steroid or other substance. We got him to talk to us, and he did a really good issue with us. And, I don't know, the light bulb went off that said, maybe we should start doing interviews when we can get them. And somewhere in the 20s or 30s, we did 114 issues total. And somewhere in the 20s and 30s, we started having an interview every issue with, an interview every issue at a certain point we got in there. And most of it was, they weren't necessarily subscribers, but we knew people in the business and said, hey, you got a number you can give us? Or they would actually approach somebody and say, hey, if you want to, these guys are interested in talking to you, and they're good guys. They'll treat you right. They're not going to distort what you have to say. They're above board. And that's how we got them. A couple interviews we got because we looked up the Yellow Pages.
What's that? Hey, young guy. We got a bunch of young listeners probably want to know what the hell you're talking about there. So
we got the Briscoe Brothers we got Jack. We didn't do Jerry, but we got Jack Briscoe by calling Briscoe Brothers Garage. We got Stan Hansen by going through the David called Information. and he got his phone number that way. It was listed. And so he got information for Stan Hansen and got that interview. Missy Hyatt, I think we got because I had sent a copy of an article I'd written about her to her through WCW, and they gave it to her. And so she called me up to thank me for what I wrote in the article, because it was very, I think she's always been an underrated talent. And so she ended up doing an interview with us that really popped our subscriber numbers big time. And, big time being a relative term. But,
right.
we're not talking observer numbers, anything like that, but she did kind of push us over a hump, and that really helped our distribution. But yeah, it was really just, talking to people, connections. One person saw our newsletter and said because I forgot where he saw it. I can't remember whose coffee table he saw it on, but he's like, I want to be interviewed by these guys. So, which was high praise. It was a really nice thing. So
come on now, you don't have to kayfabe after all these years. No, you can tell.
No, it was Les Thatcher who said that.
Oh, okay.
It was Les Thatcher who, I don't think I'm speaking out of school.
No.
And so he did that. He saw it. It might have been. I just can't remember whose coffee table it was on, so I don't want to give out the wrong information there. And Dave did the majority of the interviews. I did a few, and occasionally we did them together. But Dave did a great job with Les, because Les is a fantastic interview, and Dave interviews people for a living. He's interviewed every major candidate for the presidency going back to like 2000 or something like that.
See, we should have had him on the show instead of Paul. God, what was we thinking?
Bring him on. You'll get a better episode. You'll get. Absolutely. I would have suggested having the two of us together, but you'd have a 3-hour show, because we don't stop talking when we get together, and half of it would be about music.
There you go. Yeah, well, that's, me and Lance recorded one of these, and we spend 20 minutes before and 20 minutes later after it, either bitching about what happened at work or believe it or not, there's podcast drama. I'm coming up on the 100th episode, and it seems that we didn't get it as bad in the newsletters, where people were like, I don't know, stabbing you in the back, or didn't want to trade this, didn't want to trade that. It's just hilarious, because I used to trade my newsletter to everyone, I guess, except for Meltzer, and it was just fun that that we were able to. Trade out and get, my Wrestling Riot was actually advertised in Observer, which would, help my subscription base there. How many people did we have at the most subscribing to your bulletin? And do you remember how much we charged? You probably do, but how much did you charge?
I want to say the peak was the 150 neighborhood in terms of circulation.
Right.
So around 150-ish, maybe 175. I think the Bruno interview, that issue sold more than 200, but we had to do reprints of it. The Bruno interview continued to sell for a long time, because it was the first time he ever broke kayfabe. And it's a great interview. I had nothing to do with it, so I can say that. Other than, that was all David, and he got 2 hours out of Bruno, and it was amazing. But that one hit over 200. A couple of the Missy issues might have hit over 200, because we interviewed her like 4 times over the years, and she was always popular. And a couple others might have popped over that number, but Bruno was probably the best seller. Missy's the one that got us more notice, and then Bruno's the one that sold the most over time. And in terms of the cost, it was originally $1, and we liked that. It was nice and simple,
right.
$1. And we always got frustrated. I'm sure you got frustrated by this too. People who, tape update was like 75 cents, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. So people would ask for a sample. They'd spend, the 29 cents on a stamp and ask for a sample copy. And I'm like, you couldn't enclose $1? $1?
You could at least send $1. Come on now.
Yeah, right. $1, And so that was all, and what I found over the years is the people that ask for a sample without sending you the $1 were far less likely to subscribe than the people who sent $1 for one issue. let me try it out, but I'm willing to put down the dollar. Those people are more likely to stick than those who just said, give me the free sample.
Well,
so we started out at $1. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I got involved with Fact Sheet 5, and we mentioned this during with Gag when I had Jeff Singer on here, and you talk about exchanging. I got some of the weirdest newsletters that you would ever get. I got and the thing about it is all of us kind of eventually just quit doing newsletters, and we've noticed that a lot of people, it's almost like podcasting is what newsletter was in the height. Like, there is so many people with a podcast, and when I started back doing one, I was just like, every time I turned around, well, so-and-so does this podcast, and this guy does this, and I'm like, am I ever going to get an audience? But thank goodness I've got Wrestling Right, and then I did a Memphis-based kind of kayfabe sheet that you probably have it was a website for about 5 years, and I have that audience, and then then the audience of people that know me now. So it's kind of weird that we were able to grab people, and these have really made people excited to sit and listen to you guys talk about putting together. You said something while you were talking about mailing articles to each other. I did the same. I never thought about that, but I had to wait till they came in the mail before I could copy them and put them in the. It's just, it was just a lot crazier thing than what can be done now. Hey man, I want to ask you one last question, then we'll get you off here. So all the interviews you had and the people that subscribed to the bulletins, who would you say was your biggest pushback? Was there anyone that pushed that said you guys shouldn't be doing what you're doing and didn't have any interest in being interviewed by you guys?
There were people who declined to be interviewed, though none for any reason of breaking kayfabe or anything like that. And I'm trying to remember, and David would be the better one to talk to, because I remember there was one person he was trying to get an interview with, and the guy was just like, nah, you know what, my time's valuable. And there might have been one or two wrestlers who were like, yeah, I'll do it if you pay me. And we're like, no, thank you. We're not making any money on this. We're barely, we're barely breaking even, if that. And some years we were taking a loss on it. So we weren't going to pay people to help us lose money.
Oh yeah. That's I mean, all of us don't have a story like me, who Jerry Lawler tried to beat up in the dressing room. Not all of us can say that. But hey guys, I want to thank all the listeners for listening. We want to thank my old buddy Paul McArthur for joining us, our guest. Thank the sponsors every week. I thank you guys, and remember, we'll be right here, same bat time, same bat channel. The best little wrestling podcast in the business. Be there. Love my mama. Hey, thanks, Paul.